All right. The last thing we saw of Alabama, Vanderbilt in victory formation, taking knees. Malachi Moore going berserk, throwing his mouthpiece, kicking the ball, just, having a complete tantrum, which, look, it's a very unusual feeling. It's a very unusual place for Alabama to be. Where does Alabama go from here? How does Alabama, one, avoid another loss like this, and two, get back to the team we saw beat Georgia the week before?
Yeah, I think that the simplest answer there is get back to winning, right? I mean, it's one of those deals where in college football, these embarrassing losses are something that torment fan bases. And, we explored this yesterday, but Alabama's fans haven't had to feel a loss like this in literally 2 decades almost, right? So, it's a very foreign feeling. But in this new system, Alabama is in a position where they are still in both of our postseason bracket projections. They still have one of the 2 best wins in college football this year, and they have a lot ahead of them. And, looking at their schedule, they have a pretty manageable spot with a home game at South Carolina coming up this week. And then, 2 weeks from now, Andy, they're in Knoxville. And that's going to be a massive, massive game for both Alabama and a Tennessee team that is either on the bubble or one of the last few in, depending on where you look. So, I think if Alabama wins the next 2 games, goes to Knoxville and beats Tennessee, which I think is certainly a possibility, if not a probability, then they're right back in the saddle.
Let's hear from Kalen DeBoer. He got asked about the Malachi Moore outburst and kind of what followed after that. And then he had an interesting just comment on the state of the team in general.
He was much better when he got in the locker room. The guy pours everything into what he does, doesn't make it okay. And we want to, be first class in everything we do. And, there's a lot of guys that are really frustrated. So, I think the key is that, we turn that frustration into, positives moving forward and make sure we remember what we feel here tonight. And remember that tomorrow when we show up, and Tuesday and Wednesday, all season long.
Now, don't kick the ball after the officials spotted it. That's where Moore went too far. But I'm actually okay with everything that happened before that. I want, if I'm an Alabama fan, one of the players who's viewed as a leader to say, this is unacceptable. This can't happen. We can't be this. Now, again, don't kick the ball after the officials have spotted it. But somebody has to step up and say that. And a coach can say that all they want, especially a new coach. It's not necessarily going to land the way it will when a player says that. And I imagine there's a couple other players in that Alabama locker room who came out and said, this is not acceptable. So we'll find out. Before we go on talking about the Tide, Ari, got to tell everybody about Prize Picks. Download that app. Best daily fantasy game in America. Use the code STAPLES. Play $5. Get $50 instantly. You're picking squares. There's a player. There's a statistical category. So, we're talking Bama players. It may be Jalen Milroe. How many yards will he throw for against South Carolina? More than, less than? How many yards of receiving will Ryan Williams have against South Carolina? More than or less than? Or how many touchdowns might Ryan Williams score? That seems to be a pretty popular category these days. That's how you play Prize Picks. You pick at least 2 squares. The more you pick, the higher the potential payout. There's one of my losing tickets from this weekend. No, I don't always win. I'm not going to pretend I always win. I did not. I underestimated Duke's defense against Haynes King, even though Georgia Tech did win that game. But Alabama, going to be some interesting squares as the week comes around. As you get to Wednesday, Thursday, that's when you start seeing the squares for Saturday's games. Be some interesting ones for the Tide against the South Carolina team that has a pretty good defense, but took it in the knackers against Ole Miss last week. Download the Prize Picks app. Use the code STAPLES. Play 5, get $50 instantly. Ari, let's talk about this game. I think if Alabama had done what everybody thought and just beat Vanderbilt, we would be looking at this as a sandwich game, as they're going to look past South Carolina all the way to Tennessee. The South Carolina, remember, has beaten Kentucky in very impressive fashion. lost to LSU after Lenora Sellers got hurt at halftime or right before halftime, and then got thrashed by Ole Miss. So, like, South Carolina needs this very badly. And I think if Alabama just rolled over Vanderbilt, it might be something you worry about. I don't worry about it now because Alabama needs it worse.
Well, the thing you have to actually ask yourself about this Alabama team, and we talked about this at great length on our show, but why did Alabama lose the way that it did? Like, why was Vanderbilt able to be as physical, as skilled? Maybe not as skilled. Ryan Williams is on Alabama's team, but blow for blow, punch for 4 quarters, Vanderbilt existed in a game with Alabama and ended up winning. Alabama needed stops in the second half. They couldn't get them. Vanderbilt needed scores in the second half. They got them. Like, why did that happen? And is that something that you think can happen again against a team that might not be as good as the top tier SEC teams they still have to play on their schedule this year?
Yeah, and that's the thing that scares you is if you can lose to Vandy, you can lose to a lot of other teams on your schedule, and Nick Saban's not there anymore. So the guarantee of, hey, Nick Saban's here. If this opponent's inferior, we don't have to worry about it. We're gonna kill him. That doesn't happen anymore. And so I'm looking at Tennessee, Missouri, at LSU, at Oklahoma. Those are all potentially losable games. Auburn is a potentially losable game. I realize they have not won an SEC game yet, but they've been in games and they seem to show up when they play the Tide, even when they're having bad years. So Alabama needs to be on guard for this. And it's like Kalen DeBoer said, like they got to remember that feeling. And I'll take it back to a classic Nick Sabanism. Never waste a failure. He used to always say that when they lost, which was very rarely. But he'd say, never waste a failure. You know, basically find a way to learn from this. Find a way to use that frustration, that anger, that angst, and turn it into something positive. We'll see if this team can do it, because it's not Nick Saban delivering that message anymore. It's somebody different. And the question is, can Kalen DeBoer do that effectively? We're going to find out.